Now that I had the two side panels done, it was time to decide how wide the front of the cabinet was going to be. At first I considered having a bunch of drawers, but ultimately I decided on having two doors on the front and one drawer above each door. Each door would have a raised panel and 2-inch wide stiles, just like the side panels. Doors would then sit flush in the face frame with a flush drawer above it. Once I added a 4-inch wide vertical divider between the doors and a 2.5-inch wide vertical frame members on each side, I had the overall width of the cabinet. So now I could build two frames to tie the side panels together. I had some soft maple left over from a previous job, so I ripped it to 1.5-inch strips, and then because the maple was from two different sources and the thicknesses weren't the same, I ran it all through my planer to get an even 3/4-inch thick collection of strips. Next, I cut those strips to length, about 1 inch less than what my overall width of the cabinet was going to be. And then I cut some 2-inch wide strips to join those narrower strips together to make two frames. I used pocket hole screws and glue to tie all of the frame pieces together. Then once the glue dried on the frames, I hit them with the joints with a sander to make the tops and bottoms nice and smooth. I set up a 3/4-inch wide dado stack in my table saw and then adjusted the height of the teeth to 1/4 inch off the table. With a sacrificial fence in place, I ran the inside top edge of both of the side panels through the dado to get a 1/4 inch deep by 3/4 inch wide rabbet on both. I then moved the fence and put another rabbet down near the bottom of the panel on both. Next, I switched over to my router table so I could put a 1/4 by 1/4 rabbet on the back edge of both panels. This would be for the back panel once the whole cabinet was assembled. Next, I edged some more rough oak and ran it through my planer to bring it down to 3/4 thick. I ripped two pieces to 2.5-inch wide each, trimmed them to length, and then clamped them to the two side panels. Put some tape on and then marked where I was going to put biscuits in to join them together. Using my marks on my tape, I cut biscuits in both the side panels and the two front vertical members and then glued them together. Now that the two outside members of the face frame were glued onto the side panels, it was a lot easier to stand up the two side panels and then insert the upper and the lower frames and clamp it all together. I ripped board for the front lower rail. Then I traced the same curve I'd used on the side rails, cut them out on the bandsaw, and sanded them smooth with the belt and drum sander. Next, I positioned that front lower rail in place and spaced it up to the same height as the two side lower rails. Then I clamped it all together real snug. I put some tape across both of the joints and marked them for cutting a biscuit. Clamped the assembly back together but didn't glue it yet. Next, I cut a top rail and center stile and fit them in place with clamps. Then I drilled these pieces for pocket hole screws. I like to drill a shallow 1/8 inch pilot hole through the pocket hole before running the screw in. I also added rails between the door and drawer openings. Once the face frame members were all sized, located, and drilled, it was time to disassemble and start gluing up. I started with the left side, gluing the lower frame to the side. Then I glued the lower rail biscuit joint in place. Next, I put glue on the right side biscuit joint and on the right side panel and frame joint. Then I clamped all the parts together. Next, I attached the center stile to the lower rail. Then I glued and clamped the upper rail and drawer rails in place and drove the pocket screws home. This completed the face frame, and the cabinet was starting to take shape.